At the clinic, the nurse looked at my file. Her face turned pale, and she whispered, "Wait here. Don't leave with him." My body froze in the chair. My heart pounded so loudly I thought everyone in the waiting room could hear it. Minutes later, she called for security, and that's when everything I thought I knew about my life began to fall apart. Before I tell you what happened, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because this story is one you'll never forget. My name is Alara, and I was 26 when this happened. I went to the clinic that morning for what I thought would be a routine checkup. I had been fainting often, and my mom insisted I go see a doctor. I didn't think much of it. To me, it was just another ordinary day. My uncle Daniel offered to drive me there. He had been close to my family ever since my dad passed away. On the surface, he always seemed helpful. He paid for groceries when money was tight, and he often reminded me how much he cared about me. Everyone in the family called him generous, protective, the kind of uncle any girl would be lucky to have. But deep down, I always felt something wasn't right. Daniel was kind in public, but in private, he could be controlling. When I wanted to go out with friends, he would ask who they were, where I was going, and when I would be home. If I pushed back, his smile would fade, and his voice would grow sharp. I brushed it off as him being overprotective, telling myself he just cared too much. That morning in the waiting room, Daniel sat beside me, his arm draped casually over the back of my chair. To anyone watching, it probably looked comforting, but to me, his touch felt heavy, like a chain I couldn't break. He leaned toward me and said, "Don't worry, kiddo. I'll take care of everything. Just relax." He smiled as if he was the hero in my story. I nodded, even though my stomach twisted into knots. I remember staring at the posters on the clinic wall, trying to distract myself. Pictures of happy families, smiling children, health tips about eating vegetables and exercising daily. Ordinary things, safe things, things I wished my life could feel like in that moment. And then the nurse called my name. She asked for my file, flipped it open, and her entire expression changed. She glanced at Daniel, then back at me, and her eyes hardened. That was the moment I realized something was deeply wrong. When the nurse's eyes shifted from my file to my Uncle Daniel, I felt my stomach tighten. Her smile vanished in an instant, replaced with something sharper, something that made me want to shrink into my chair. She didn't say anything right away, just excused herself and stepped behind the counter. I could hear the clicking of her keyboard, fast and urgent, like she was racing against time. My chest grew heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Daniel sighed beside me, his fingers tapping against the armrest as if the world was keeping him waiting. "What's taking so long?" he muttered, his voice low and full of irritation. He shifted in his seat, his knee bouncing, and I could feel his impatience rising like a storm. I tried to steady myself. "It's just a clinic," I said softly, hoping to calm him down. "Maybe they're busy." He turned his head sharply, his eyes narrowing at me. "Busy? They should know better than to waste our time." His grip tightened on my arm, not enough to leave a mark, but enough to remind me who was in control. Moments later, the nurse returned, but her smile looked forced. She handed me a clipboard with a form to fill out, but as she leaned closer, she whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear, "Don't leave with him. Please, stay here." I froze. My pen trembled in my hand, and I looked up at her, searching her eyes for answers, but she quickly straightened her back and turned to Daniel with a professional smile. "Just a few more minutes, sir. We'll call you both in shortly." Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms, pretending to be relaxed, but I knew him well enough to read the tension in his jaw. "We've already been here too long," he said, his tone clipped. "We'll leave if this doesn't move faster." The nurse didn't flinch. "Of course, sir. Thank you for your patience." Then she turned and walked away briskly, disappearing into the back. I sat there, gripping the clipboard so tightly, my knuckles turned white. My heart raced. Why did she tell me not to leave with him? What did she know? And how did my file have anything to do with it? Daniel glanced at me and frowned. "What did she say to you?" My throat went dry. "Nothing. Just paperwork." He studied me for a moment too long, like he was searching for cracks in my answer. Then he smirked, the kind of smirk that made me feel like I was 5 years old again, powerless and small. "Good. Don't let people push you around. You've got me, and that's all you need." I wanted to believe him, to convince myself the nurse was overreacting. But deep inside, a voice kept whispering that the nurse had seen something real, something dangerous. I thought back to all the times Daniel had interfered in my life, the way he dismissed my friends as bad influences, the way he insisted on driving me everywhere, the way he called me late at night just to check in. I had always brushed it off as overprotective love, but now, sitting there with the nurse's warning echoing in my mind, it didn't feel like love. It felt like control. Minutes stretched like hours. Every time the door opened and a nurse walked through, My eyes darted to them, hoping they would call me, hoping they would explain what was happening. Instead, I was trapped in silence with Daniel, his presence pressing down on me. Finally, he leaned in close, his voice low and almost a growl. "When we're done here, we're leaving immediately. No stopping. Anywhere else. Understand?" I swallowed hard. "Why?" His eyes narrowed. "Because I said so. Don't question me." The words made my skin crawl. I wanted to stand up, to shout for help, but fear kept me glued to my seat. If I pushed too hard, if I showed too much resistance, I didn't know how far he would go. Then I noticed something. 2 nurses had gathered near the hallway, whispering while glancing in our direction. One of them picked up a phone, speaking quickly before hanging up. My pulse quickened. Something was happening behind the scenes. Daniel noticed too. He shifted forward, his tone suddenly sharp. "What are they doing? Why do they keep looking at us?" I forced a shaky smile. Maybe they're just busy. But I knew he wasn't buying it. He clenched his fists, his voice rising. "This place is a mess. We're leaving." He grabbed my wrist, starting to pull me up. Before I could move, the nurse from earlier stepped in front of us, blocking the way with a firm but calm expression. "Sir, the doctor will see her in just a moment. Please stay seated." Daniel's face hardened. "We don't have time for this." Her eyes didn't leave his. "You need to wait." For a moment, the air felt thick enough to choke on. Daniel's grip tightened around my wrist, his nails pressing into my skin, and I was sure he would drag me out anyway. But then, from somewhere down the hall, I heard the faint static of a radio, the kind carried by security guards. That's when I realized the nurse hadn't just warned me. She had taken action. She wasn't going to let me walk out of those doors with him. And sitting there with my heart racing, trapped between my uncle's grip and the nurse's determination, I knew the truth. I was in danger, and this was only the beginning. The moment I heard the crackle of that radio in the hallway, I knew the nurse wasn't bluffing. She had already put something in motion, and all I had to do was hold on. But that was easier said than done. Daniel's grip on my wrist was iron, and the look in his eyes warned me that if I resisted too openly, I would regret it. I forced myself to stay calm. If I panicked, he would notice. If I cried or fought back, he would tighten his hold. I took a slow breath and made a decision. I was going to trust the nurse. I didn't know her name. I didn't know exactly what she had seen in my file, but I knew she was my only chance. The nurse stood firm in front of us, her shoulders squared as if she was ready for a confrontation. "Please, sir," she said, her voice steady but not aggressive. "Just a moment longer. We're confirming something important." Daniel's nostrils flared. "Important? She's here for a simple checkup. What could possibly be so important?" His voice carried across the waiting room, and a few other patients turned their heads. He hated being the center of attention in this way. I could see it in the way his jaw clenched. I swallowed hard and forced my voice not to shake. "Uncle Daniel, maybe we should wait. I don't feel well. What if it's something serious?" His eyes flicked to me, narrowing. "You're fine. You always exaggerate." He squeezed my wrist as if to remind me to stay quiet. The nurse didn't back down. She leaned slightly toward me and asked, "Would you like a glass of water while you wait?" Her eyes locked with mine, and I understood. This was her way of offering me a moment to break free. I nodded quickly. "Yes, please." For the first time, I pulled my hand back, pretending it was to reach for the cup she would bring me. Daniel's grip loosened just enough for me to slip my wrist out of his hold. He didn't like it, but because other people were watching, he let go. That tiny victory gave me courage. I shifted my chair closer to the nurse's desk, creating a small but important distance between us. My heart still pounded, but at least I wasn't pinned down by his hand anymore. Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Don't think you can play games. When we leave here, we're going straight home, and you're not going anywhere without me again." His words sent a shiver through me, but I refused to let him see my fear. Instead, I sat up straighter, clutching the clipboard to my chest like a shield. Inside, I repeated to myself, "Trust the nurse. Don't run. Don't make a scene. Just wait." The nurse returned with a paper cup of water, her movements calm and deliberate. She handed it to me with a reassuring nod, then stepped back toward the hallway. I watched her disappear, and I knew she was going to get help. Every second dragged. I kept expecting Daniel to stand up and storm out, dragging me behind him, but something held him in place. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the eyes of the other patients on us. Whatever it was, it gave the nurse more time. The silence between us grew thick. Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms, his foot tapping against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We're leaving soon. Don't say a word when we do." I forced a sip of the water, pretending to stay calm while inside I was screaming. I glanced toward the hallway, silently begging for someone to appear. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, I saw 2 men in clinic uniforms step into the waiting room. They weren't in scrubs. They wore security badges clipped to their belts. My pulse spiked. The nurse walked in right behind them, her face composed but her eyes sharp. She gave me a small, almost invisible nod. That nod told me everything. She had chosen to protect me, and now I had to play my part. Daniel noticed instantly. His whole body stiffened, his eyes darting from the guards to the nurse. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "What did you tell them?" My throat closed, but I stayed quiet. The nurse answered for me. "Sir, we need to speak with you for a moment. Please come with us." Daniel's chair screeched against the floor as he stood up quickly. "Excuse me? I came here to help my niece, and now you're wasting our time with this nonsense?" The guards didn't flinch. One of them took a small step forward. "Sir, we just need a moment of your cooperation. Please." Daniel turned to me, his face twisted with anger, his voice shaking. "Ilara, get up. We're leaving now." Every muscle in my body screamed to obey out of habit, but I stayed glued to my chair. My hands clenched the clipboard until my nails dug into the cardboard. My voice trembled, but I managed to whisper, "I think I should stay." That single sentence was the hardest thing I had ever said. His eyes burned with fury, but before he could react, the guards moved closer. "Sir," one of them repeated firmly, "you need to come with us." Daniel spun toward them, his voice rising. "She's my niece. I'm responsible for her. You have no right." The nurse cut in, her voice calm but unyielding. "Sir, your presence here violates a court order. Security has already been contacted." The words hung heavy in the air. My heart slammed against my ribs. A court order? Against him? Daniel froze for a split second, then his face twisted into rage. He lunged forward, but the guards blocked his path. Patients in the waiting room gasped. The tension snapped into chaos. And in that moment, as they stepped between us, I realized something life-changing. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had chosen to trust the nurse, and that choice had set everything in motion. The moment the nurse said Daniel's presence violated a court order, the entire room shifted. Her words hit me like a thunderclap. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at her, trying to make sense of what she had just revealed. A court order? Against my uncle? My mind spun in disbelief. The man who had sat at our dinner table, who bought me birthday presents, who my mother had called a blessing after my father died, he was the subject of a court order? Daniel's face changed in an instant. His mask of calm, that forced smile he wore for strangers, fell away. What replaced it was pure rage. He lurched forward, his arm outstretched toward me as if to drag me out of the chair. But before he could touch me, both guards stepped in. One caught his wrist mid-air, twisting it back with practiced force, while the other blocked his path with a firm shoulder. "Let go of me," Daniel roared, his voice echoing through the waiting room. People gasped. A mother shielded her little boy, pulling him behind her chair. An elderly man muttered a prayer under his breath. Everyone could see the truth now. The charming uncle wasn't charming at all. The guards pushed Daniel back, one of them holding him firmly by the arm. He fought like a cornered animal, his legs kicking against the tiled floor. His voice cracked as he screamed, "She's my niece. You can't take her away from me. She needs me. She has no one else." But that wasn't true. I had my mother. I had myself. I had a chance at freedom if I was brave enough to take it. The nurse stepped forward, her voice calm but firm, cutting through his rage. "Sir, this clinic is a safe space. You are violating the terms of your restraining order. Security is already contacting the police restraining order." The words sank into my chest like a stone. I couldn't breathe. My uncle had a restraining order. The nurse's voice, sharp and steady, stripped away every illusion I had clung to about him. Suddenly, his constant presence in my life didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt like surveillance. His controlling questions weren't care. They were domination. And now, the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. Daniel's eyes locked on mine, wild and desperate. "Ilara, don't believe them. They're lying to you. You know me. You know I would never hurt you, but I did know him. I knew the way his grip left my arm aching. I knew the way his voice lowered into threats when I tried to push back. I knew the way he made me feel like I owed him my freedom because he had taken care of me. I knew enough to understand the nurse wasn't lying. For the first time, I let myself see him for what he truly was. Tears blurred my vision, but I shook my head. My voice trembled, but it came out clear. "No, Uncle Daniel, I don't believe you anymore." His face twisted as if I had stabbed him. He fought harder, spitting words like venom. "Ungrateful brat. After everything I've done for you, you think you're better off without me? You'll regret this, you hear me? You'll regret it." The guards pinned his arms behind his back, dragging him toward the exit. His shoes scraped against the floor, his shouts echoing down the hall until the heavy front doors slammed shut behind them. The sound of silence that followed was deafening. I sat trembling in my chair, my whole body shaking as if I had just survived an earthquake. My throat burned, and I could barely form words. The nurse crouched beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You're safe now," she said softly. Safe. The word felt foreign, like something I hadn't tasted in years. For the first time, I realized how unsafe I had been all along. The nurse guided me to a quieter room, away from the stares of the waiting patients. She brought me tissues, water, and time to breathe. Once my shaking slowed, she explained everything. My uncle had been accused years ago of manipulating and controlling another young woman in the family, someone he had claimed to be protecting. The courts had issued a restraining order after the situation escalated into threats. His name had been flagged in the system, and when the nurse saw him listed as my emergency contact, the alert triggered immediately. As I listened, I felt both sick and strangely relieved. Sick that I had ignored all the red flags for so long. Relieved that someone had finally seen what I couldn't admit. The nurse told me, "You're not alone in this. The police are on their way to take him in. You need to call your mother, and you need to be with people who truly care for you." I nodded, gripping the cup of water like it was the only solid thing in my world. My mind replayed every moment with Daniel, every time he had guilted me, every time he had tightened his control, every time I had silenced my doubts. The truth had always been there. I had just been too afraid to face it. When the police arrived, I stayed in the back room, not ready to see him again. I heard his muffled shouts through the walls, the slam of car doors, and finally, the quiet hum of an engine fading away. The moment I realized he was gone, my chest finally loosened. I was safe, but more importantly, I was free. The climax of that day wasn't just about Daniel being taken away. It was about me finally breaking free from the illusion that he was my protector. The truth was harsh, but it gave me something I hadn't had in years, the chance to rebuild my life without fear. When the police car carrying my uncle finally pulled away, I sat in that small side room of the clinic for what felt like hours. My body still shook from the adrenaline, and my mind kept replaying every second of what had just happened. The waiting room, the nurse's warning, Daniel's rage, the guards dragging him away. It all swirled in my head like a storm refusing to settle. I had thought I knew who he was. I had thought family meant safety. But the truth had shattered those beliefs in one single afternoon. The nurse stayed with me until my mother arrived. She offered quiet words of reassurance, reminding me over and over, "You're not alone. You did the right thing by staying." Those words sank deep into my heart, because for so long I had felt trapped in silence. I had convinced myself that speaking up would only make things worse, that my doubts were just paranoia. Now I saw how wrong I had been. When my mother walked in, her face pale and eyes wide, I broke down in tears. She rushed to me, pulling me into her arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You're safe," she whispered again and again, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I felt her tears wet my hair, and in that embrace, I finally allowed myself to let go of the fear I had carried for years. We sat together while the nurse explained everything. My mother's hands trembled as she learned the truth, that Daniel had been dangerous long before this day, that the courts had already flagged him as a threat, that he had no right to be around me. My mother's voice cracked when she said, "I trusted him. I thought he was helping us. I never imagined." She trailed off, unable to finish. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see weakness in her tears. I saw love, real, protective love, the kind that doesn't control or demand, but shields and supports. My mother had been misled, just as I had, but she was here now, standing by me, and that gave me strength. The days after the incident felt strange, like walking through a dream. The police contacted us for statements, and I had to relive every detail. It wasn't easy, but each time I spoke the truth out loud, I felt a little lighter, as though the weight of silence was finally lifting. My mother and I leaned on each other. We talked more than we had in years. For the first time, I admitted how uncomfortable Daniel had made me feel, how his so-called care had always felt suffocating. My mother listened without judgment, and she promised, "From now on, it's just you and me. We'll protect each other." I also thought about the nurse, about how she could have stayed quiet, how she could have dismissed the alert in my file as unimportant. But she didn't. She chose to act. She chose to risk confrontation to protect me. That courage saved me. It made me realize how much power one person has when they refuse to ignore the signs. In the weeks that followed, I started to see the world differently. I understood now that danger doesn't always look like a stranger in the dark. Sometimes it wears a familiar face, sits at your dinner table, and calls itself family. That realization was painful, but it also gave me clarity. Trust isn't about blood, it's about actions. Real love doesn't chain you down. Real love doesn't make you small. Real love sets you free. I learned to pay attention to the voice inside me that whispered when something felt wrong. I promised myself I would never again dismiss that feeling. I wanted others to hear that lesson too, because maybe there's someone out there watching my story right now, doubting their own instincts, convincing themselves they're overreacting. To that person, I want to say, Listen to your heart. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't wait for someone else to see it. Don't wait for a crisis. Protect yourself now. My life didn't magically become perfect after that day. Healing isn't instant. I still jump when I hear angry voices. I still have nights where memories of his grip on my arm keep me awake. But I also have a new sense of strength. I know I am not helpless. I know I have the right to say no, to set boundaries, to walk away from people who claim to love me, but hurt me instead. The last thing I remember from that day at the clinic is walking out into the sunlight with my mother at my side. The air felt different, lighter somehow. My mother squeezed my hand and said, "We'll be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. That day taught me that survival isn't just about getting through the moment. It's about learning, growing, and choosing a better path forward. I chose to see the truth. I chose to break free. And that choice saved my life. So to everyone watching, thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever felt trapped or doubted your own instincts, know this: you are stronger than you think, and you deserve to be safe. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like this, and comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you.